For decades, Arab states have been the world's biggest customers for military hardware. We're talking hundreds of billions spent on the most advanced weapons money can buy. But something huge is happening. They're not just content with being the world's best customers anymore. Now they want to be the builders. Get this number in your head: $87 billion. That was just Saudi Arabia's defense budget for a single year back in 2014. That kind of spending made the entire Gulf region a giant in arms imports. But, just buying everything has a shelf life, and that expiration date is coming up fast. And that really brings us to the core question, the one that's driving this whole transformation. What happens when the world's biggest buyers decide to become builders? And believe me, this isn't just about opening a few factories. This is a strategic pivot that could seriously redraw the lines of global power. Now, you might be thinking this ambition is brand new, but actually not so much. The dream of a homegrown Arab defense industry is, well, it's a path littered with stalled projects and broken promises. To really get why today might be different, we have to first understand why all those past attempts went so wrong. This timeline really tells a story of one setback after another. In the 60s, Egypt had this big push, but it was completely derailed by war. Then in the 70s, a really promising pan-Arab project just fell apart over politics. Iraq, they made a little headway in the 80s, only to have its entire industrial base just wiped out. And the 90s, pretty much the same story. That dream of true self-sufficiency just stayed a dream. So why did it always fail? Well, the problems were deep-seated. First, their industrial base was tiny. Just 0.5% of the world's total output in the 70s. Then you have constant war, which just drains money and destroys infrastructure. Their huge armies also sucked up the budget, leaving almost nothing for R&D. Throw in a whole lot of bureaucracy and corruption, plus the fact that it was just easier and cheaper to buy weapons from abroad, and yeah, you've got a recipe for stagnation. So if the past was such a mess, what on earth has changed? Why are these nations suddenly pouring billions back into this dream, convinced that this time it's going to be different? Well, the answer is kind of a perfect storm of strategic anxiety and pure national ambition. There are really three powerful forces at work here. First, this desperate search for strategic independence. The feeling is that the U.S. security umbrella isn't as reliable as it used to be. Second, it's about the economy. Plans like Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 aren't just about getting off oil, they're about creating a high-tech economy, and defense is a huge part of that. And finally, you've just got raw national pride, what some experts call techno-nationalism. Because let's face it, in the 21st century, building your own advanced weapons, that is the ultimate status symbol. So while the end goal is pretty similar for everyone, their strategies are incredibly different. Let's take a look at the three main players in this new arms race: Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Each one is betting on a totally unique path to get there. Okay, first up is Egypt. They're kind of the veteran in this game. They've got the longest history of making arms in the region, but their model is best described as the assembler. What that means is they mostly focus on putting together kits designed somewhere else, often with a ton of financial help from the United States. And this leads to this really unique system in Egypt, which people call military incorporated. The very same military-run factories that are assembling M1A1 tanks are also making baby formula. The plants that are producing high-tech radar equipment are also churning out air conditioners and stainless steel cooking pots. It's wild. About 40% of what they make is actually for the civilian market. It's this truly bizarre hybrid industrial complex. Next, you've got Saudi Arabia, where there's this massive gap between their ambition and the reality on the ground. The dream, part of their huge Vision 2030 plan, is to locally produce 50% of their military gear by 2030. That's a huge leap from just 2% today. But the reality? It's a long history of these offset deals where foreign companies promise to reinvest locally, but which have mostly been called pipe dreams, creating very few high-tech jobs and not much real industrial power. And that brings us to our third player, the United Arab Emirates. The UAE is widely seen as the region's real up-and-comer. They're pursuing what looks like the most pragmatic, business-like, and, a lot of analysts think, the strategy most likely to actually succeed. The UAE's playbook is just super methodical. Step 1, they consolidated over a dozen state-owned firms into one giant company. Step 2, they partnered up with global titans like Lockheed Martin. Step 3, if partnering wasn't enough, they just went out and bought foreign companies outright, instantly getting all their tech. And the final step, export. Their goal is to be a net seller of weapons within a decade. So, what does the rise of these new arms producers mean for the rest of the world? Here's the crucial thing to understand. This isn't about them trying to compete with the most advanced, top-of-the-line Western technology. It's about something else entirely. It's about the rise of what you might call good enough weapons. Look, these things are not meant to go toe-to-toe with an F-35 fighter jet. But they are affordable, they're effective, and they're designed for the messy, gritty realities of regional conflicts like what we've seen in Yemen or Libya. These are weapons built not for deterring a superpower, but for winning a fight right now. And the global implications here are huge. As these traditional customers become competitors, Western nations might find their diplomatic leverage starts to shrink. We're already seeing new risks of weapons spreading. Emirati and Egyptian-made vehicles have turned up in conflict zones that are supposed to be under arms embargoes. And finally, it just creates a much more crowded, much more complex global arms market, where that old Western dominance is just no longer a given. So this all brings us to a really fundamental shift in what power even looks like. As these new builders step onto the global stage, the old rules of war are being rewritten. The critical question for the 21st century, it's no longer just about who has the best weapons. It's about who has the sovereign power to create them in the first place.